This is Islamic apologist Nadir Ahmed. Nadir Ahmed has recently been challenging Christian apologists to a debate on the thesis, "Does the Bible contain scientific errors?" Nadir has been claiming that Christian apologists are unwilling to take up his debate challenge because they know and understand that the Bible does indeed contain scientific errors. Nadir has continuously claimed this despite the fact that at least two other Christian apologists, Sahih Luke and Kent Hovind, as well as myself, have actually accepted this particular debate offer from him. I would like to say publicly right now, Nadir, I would love to challenge you on the thesis, does the Bible contain scientific errors? And also on the thesis, does the Quran contain scientific errors? I would love to see your response to this debate challenge. Today, I am going to start the first of a series of videos I will be doing here on Un-Apologetics Lite, refuting some of the claims I have heard recently from Nadir in some of his debates and videos about scientific errors in the Bible. We will take each alleged scientific error one by one in a video, hopefully 30 minutes or less, preferably 20 minutes or less, and we'll be moving on to each new topic each new week, posted Saturday. The topic here for today is going to be the virginity test found in Deuteronomy 22. Here we have a clip from Kent Hovind's debate with Nadir Ahmed, where Kent Hovind and Nadir Ahmed were debating the question of, does the Bible have scientific errors? And here in this clip we see just a brief synopsis of Nadir Ahmed's point about the virginity test in Deuteronomy 22.
We see inside the Bible that the Bible presents a virginity test. This is found inside Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 17 and 18. It says over, and they shall spread the garment before the elders of the city. So the elders of that city shall take the man and chastise him. And they shall fine him 100 shekels, and goes on that, if, basically paraphrasing, if the woman is not a virgin, she is to be stoned on her father's doorstep. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so there we see the basics of the objection here. I'm going to go ahead and read Deuteronomy 22 verses 13 through 21 in order to give you an idea of what exactly Nadir is talking about. I'm reading out of the King James Version, but any version that you have will definitely do for this particular lesson. If any man take a wife, and go in unto her, and hate her, and give occasion of speech against her, and bring up an evil name upon her, and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I found her not a maid, then shall the father of the damsel and her mother take and bring forth the tokens of the damsel's virginity unto the elders of the city in the gate. So we see here on an occasion where the husband of a wife has a problem with her, he has some sort of an issue, whether it's, legitimate or not, we haven't actually figured out, but nonetheless, he hates his wife, and he is bringing up an evil name upon her, as the Bible says, and we are seeing now what we are supposed to do in that case. Then shall the father of the damsel and her mother take and bring forth the tokens of the damsel's virginity unto the elders of the city in the gate. So we're going to be taking the tokens of the damsel's virginity to the elders of the city, just as Nadir was saying. Starting at verse 16 now. And the damsel's father shall say unto the elders, I gave my daughter unto this man to wife, and he hateth her. And lo, he hath given occasion of speech against her, saying, I found not thy daughter a maid, and yet these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity, and they shall spread the cloth before the elders of the city. So we see here that they are going to spread a cloth, a bedsheet, if you will, to the elders of the city, in front of the elders of the city, rather, to show the token of his daughter's virginity. Now, if the context isn't clear to you, just to make it a little bit more clear, the token of the daughter's virginity that is being spoken about is the blood that comes from a broken hymen upon your first sexual penetration. This is not necessarily always broken, but that is something we will get into in just one moment. And the elders of that city shall take that man and chastise him, and they shall immerse him in the 100 shekels of silver, and give them unto the father of the damsel, because he hath brought up an evil name upon a virgin of Israel, and she shall be his wife, and he may not put her away all his days. And if this thing be true, and the tokens of virginity be not found for the damsel, then shall they bring out the damsel to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her with stones that she shall die, because she hath wrought folly in Israel to play the whore in her father's house. So shalt thou put evil away from among you. So we see here that, like Nadir says, there is definitely a test to see whether or not the woman is a maid or a virgin, as we would describe it in the modern day. And we see that one of the ways to prove here in the affirmative that yes, this woman was indeed a virgin is by spreading out the bed sheets and showing the tokens of her virginity, that being blood on the bed sheets. It is the opinion of Nadir Ahmed that this indeed is a contradiction with science, and as we see here in another clip, a brief explanation as to why he actually says that.
So the virginity test over here is that the woman is to bleed on the bed sheet, and let me read it for you again. It says, and he has charged her with a shameful deed, saying, I did not find your daughter a virgin, but this is the evidence of my daughter's virginity. So there's a big problem right there. It doesn't matter what comes next. We know there is no real way to prove a woman to be a virgin. Okay.
So Nadir's problem with this is he says there is no real way to prove a woman is a virgin. He says, regardless of what comes after the phrase, these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity, it doesn't actually matter because all quote-unquote tokens of a daughter's virginity are indeed false. This claim is definitely not correct, but before we get there, I just want to address a few things. Thing number one, this verse was actually quite revolutionary for the time from a female empowerment perspective. No other culture at the time would actually go out of their way to prove the innocence of a daughter in this particular time, because women, for the most part, were considered property in cultures outside of Israel. So the fact that there is even a way to defend the woman in the first place is something that must be admired, given the time frame. The second thing we must note is that this is a law that has a penalty of death. And we know from previous scriptures that laws that have a penalty of death have other qualifications following them. For example, in Deuteronomy 17:6, we see, at the mouth of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses shall he that is worthy of death be put to death, but at the mouth of 1 witness he shall not be put to death. Also in Deuteronomy 19:15, we see, 1 witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity, or for any sin, in any sin that he sinneth. At the mouth of 2 witnesses, or at the mouth of 3 witnesses, shall the matter be established. So we see the charge of any iniquity, and especially as it pertains to the death penalty, as seen in Deuteronomy 17:6, must come with at least 2 witnesses to corroborate it. So it is not just the lack of tokens of virginity here that is going to cause any sort of an issue. Furthermore, as a third issue, we see in Deuteronomy 22:13 through 21, specifically in verse, 20, and if this thing be true, and the tokens of the virginity be not found for the damsel, noting that there are 2 separate parts of this. The thing must be true, and of course, we will not be able to find the evidence if the thing is true, that the tokens of the damsel's virginity are not going to be there, in other words. And I did slightly butcher that, so excuse me. But the point being, it does have to be proven true, and there has to be no evidence there. On top of that, we see the witnesses needed as well. But there is indeed more problems than just these initial issues rising from the scriptures. You see, the Quran itself, here in problem number 4, actually affirms not just the Hebrew Bible, but specifically the Torah portion of the Hebrew Bible. We see in Surah 7, 156 out of the Sahih International Version, through Surah 157. And decree for us in this world that which is good, and also in the hereafter. Indeed, we have turned to you, Allah said. My punishment I afflict with it whom I will, but my mercy encompasses all things. So I will decree it especially for those who fear me and give zakah, and those who believe in our verses. Those who follow the messenger, the unlettered prophet, whom they find written in what they have of the Torah and the gospel, who enjoins upon them what is right and forbids them what is wrong, and makes lawful for them the good things and prohibits for them the evil, and relieves them of their burden and the shackles which were upon them. So they who have believed in him, honored him, supported him, and followed the light which was sent down with him, it is those who will be the successful. Notice in verse 157, those who follow the messenger, the unlettered prophet, whom they find written in what they have of the Torah and the gospel. Specifically, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Tanakh, or the Old Testament as Christians call it, is referenced as inspired and sent down scripture from Allah. And we see here the phrase, in what they have of the Torah. But what did the people in Muhammad's time have of the Torah? They would have had what we have today of the Torah. And we know this because we have copies of the Torah not only from that time, but from much earlier than that time. For example, the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we know exactly what would have been in the Torah at that time, and it is what we find in Deuteronomy. So, not only is there other legal aspects that are going to go into this particular charge, but on top of that, Nadir doesn't actually have a choice but to affirm this scripture. Lastly, before we get to the science of this, we see a clear historical context that needs to be added here. To quote Got Questions, we often err in understanding biblical situations because we look at the situations from the perspective of modern cultural and social norms. We need to remember that the law was given to the Israelites soon after they had come out of bondage in Egypt. The instruction of Deuteronomy 22 was given to the people of Israel, a conservative and closed community, about 3,500 years ago. In that time period and in those conditions, what activities could the Israelite girls have indulged in that would have broken their hymens? There were no sports or horseback riding or other activities that sometimes result in broken hymens. In Egypt, the girls would mainly have been confined to their slave quarters. In their trip to Canaan, they would have stayed near the camps and completed household chores, again without much chance of overly strenuous activity. Hence the law's prescribed test of virginity would have been considerably more accurate than what we might expect given today's norms. So we see here that there is definitely a historical context that needs to be explained. Namely, the fact that many of the things which we see today that do indeed break women's hymens, things like horseback riding, car crashes, and physical activity in sports, are not things that women in Israel, ancient Israel at the time, would have been doing. But none of this is actually the most important part. It's irrelevant that Deuteronomy actually makes sure that there is a way not only to prove this, but also that we have multiple witnesses before we put anyone to death. And it's irrelevant that the Quran actually forces Nadir to accept these verses. It is also irrelevant that it was very, very, very unlikely for the hymen to actually be broken in something that was not penetrative sexual activity at that time. Why are every single one of these things irrelevant? Well, because Nadir specifically said that the tokens of her virginity was what he had a problem with. In other words, the broken hymen in Nadir's mind is not positive affirmation of virginity. But this is completely absurd. Anybody with half a brain and anybody in the medical field will confirm for you that indeed a broken hymen is positive affirmation of virginity. When people say things like there is no such thing as a virginity test, what they actually mean is there is no such thing as negative affirmation in a virginity test. In other words, the lack of blood does not prove a woman did have sex, but the presence of blood does prove that a woman did not have sex. And it is the presence of blood, the tokens of her virginity that the father is laying out, that Nadir has said he has a problem with. Let's go ahead and listen again just one more time, just to make sure we're clear on that particular point.
Okay, so the virginity test over here is that the woman is to bleed on the bed sheet, and let me read it for you again. It says, and he has charged her with a shameful deed, saying, I did not find your daughter a virgin, but this is the evidence of my daughter's virginity. So there's a big problem right there. It doesn't matter what comes next. We know there is no real way to prove a woman to be a virgin. Okay.
So as we see, he has a problem with the father showing the bloody bed sheet as evidence of the woman's virginity. But this is not what scientists say. The blood on the bed sheet is indeed positive affirmation that she has not had penetrative sex. The lack of blood on the bed sheet would not be proof positive that she has not had sex. Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, we know because of the blood that she is a virgin. We do not know as a result of no blood that she was not a virgin. And you don't have to take my word for it. Here we have a source from New Health Advisor. Virgins and non-virgin differences. Are there physical differences? A woman who has a hymen is certainly a virgin. One more time. A woman who has a hymen is certainly a virgin. So, to recap the issues that we had today with Nadir Ahmed's original argument. His original argument was that the Deuteronomy virginity test, in Deuteronomy 22:13 through 21, contradicted science as it is known today. But we saw, for one, that Deuteronomy 22 makes perfectly clear we need to prove this claim and have no evidence. For two, Deuteronomy 19 and 17 make perfectly clear there needs to be at least 2 to 3 witnesses for the death penalty to be carried out. Number 3, that the Quran actually affirms these scriptures. Number 4, that there is a historical context that would make it almost impossible for a woman's hymen to be broken. And number 5, and most importantly, that blood on the bed sheets does indeed positively affirm beyond any shadow of a doubt that a woman was a virgin and that the man who is accusing her is lying. So what are we going to look at next? Next week we'll be talking about the mustard seed and Nadir Ahmed's claim that the parable of the mustard seed violates, or contradicts rather, modern science. Nadir, if you catch this, I am looking forward to your response on that debate, and God bless you, my brother in humanity, and God bless the rest of you in Jesus Christ's holy name. To him be the glory. Shalom.